Well, I'm going to describe in this video the route of what I think is a very rewarding walk from and around the village of Monkton Farleigh. It's a quiet route, it's quite open and pleasing on the eye. In fact, there's some very good views down towards Bath and beyond. It offers, well, a medieval church and manor house, a 17th century pub and a Victorian folly. But in addition to that, I think the area also involves some quite intriguing history that is perhaps rather more hidden. And we'll have a look at that also. It's only 3 miles. The village is close to Bath. It's on the western edge of the county. And a video like this might be useful in helping you decide whether to do the walk, but it's not much use at the time you're actually trying to do that. So in that case, you might consider looking at this web page where there is a route you can print out, or perhaps one that you can refer to while you're walking on a smartphone. Now I'm going to walk through it on this outline map, pointing out some interesting features and generally giving you a sense of what you can expect to see. I would start at St. Peter's, the parish church. Some of it dates from the 13th century, in particular the tower, but most of what you see here is actually heavily restored in the 1800s. But I think it's worth a trip inside. And incidentally, if you came here by car, there should be a space to park nearby this spot. Well, then you walk up this hill towards taking a right turn and then follow this pleasant lane, rearing right towards this field gate. But first, before entering the field, pause and look the other way towards this area here, because it's the site of the Monkton Farleigh Manor House. Sadly, you can only look at it as it's not open to visit. Originally, there was a priory of Benedictine monks on this site linked to the church, and I think the building still retains some of that original priory structure. Along came Henry VIII in 1536, dissolving all such monasteries, and of course the full story of the dissolution involves that king granting such land and such buildings to various people that he favoured, and in this case he favoured Sir Edward Seymour, the brother of his wife at that time, Jane Seymour. Of course, Jane Seymour was the only one of his wives that gave him a son, a boy who was to be the future Edward VI. But being a child king, Edward VI needed a protector, and that was Sir Edward Seymour. And so where you look now is his house, or well, maybe just one of his houses perhaps. At the present time, the house belongs to Sir Charles Hobhouse, former explorer, and more recently he was the High Sheriff of Wiltshire. Now back to the walk and through that gate to take a path up to the lane that is Farleigh Rise. That lane offers a pleasant walk on a gentle slope, and on that walk you may notice a pillbox, which may seem a rather odd thing to encounter in a quiet countryside like this, and you may wonder why would it need to be there. Well, the answer is that the area under where you're walking was formerly a vast quarry producing the precious limestone that was so widely used in the architecture of Bath. However, in the late 1930s, the government purchased these quarries from the Hobhouse family to create from them one of 3 central ammunition depots. Some of the once camouflaged shafts leading down into that area are actually still visible, and you may notice one. Other smaller shafts also existed, more difficult to find, and they supported the air conditioning necessary for such a network of reinforced concrete tunnels 450 feet underground. A further mile-long tunnel was freshly bored in order to reach the main GWR rail line for munitions loading near Box Tunnel. And at its peak, around 1,000 tons of ammunition were shifted to this line on a daily basis. All of this vast construction and rebuilding of the quarries was achieved by thousands of labourers who were imported from the Midlands and the north of England and who were billeted in the city of Bath. The whole thing is estimated to have cost, in today's money, around about £5 billion. And then afterwards, much money was spent trying to keep the area viable until the MOD finally sold the complex in 1975 to be a kind of museum, although that failed, and after a while vandalism took over. At the moment, I think it's owned by a secure storage firm. So, strangely, technologies of destruction beneath a tranquil landscape, which we continue walking along until reaching this turn on the right towards some housing, although the map shows, if you look, that you can stay on the lane and walk round this part if you prefer. But it's a pleasant path. It leads to a small clutch of modern housing, and beyond that there is a signed entrance to a footpath which you take and walk through a wooded, very pleasantly wooded area towards a gate which leads into a more open area with fine views towards Bath. And at this point you should veer left and take some steps up to a higher path where, as in this picture, I think you can see a couple of walkers taking that path in the left-hand distance. Well, it's a path which takes you to what's called Brown's Folly. Brown's Folly was built in 1845 by Lord of the Manor Wade Brown, who said his purpose was to simply provide employment for local people who were suffering an agricultural recession at that time. It can be climbed, although I wouldn't say it's exactly up to speed with health and safety features, so if you do climb it, certainly climb it with care. And as the sign at the Folly explains, this whole area is also a site of special scientific interest. Particularly of interest are the rare roosting bats to be found here. Well, then take this gate into a wooded area and shortly take a left turn onto a path that takes you back to the road into Monkton Farleigh. And off you go down that road, and eventually you will pass and reach the possibility of refreshment in this early 17th century pub, which is the King's Arms. As mentioned at the start, there's a web page that might be more useful at the time of walking if you do fancy taking this route. And finally, there are a number of other walks similarly enjoyable which you might like to check out on this website.